Hello everyone and welcome to a truly remarkable game that will improve your day at least tenfold, and I'm not even exaggerating. It's from the 2014 Dortmund Sparkassen tournament where Fabiano Caruana is facing former FIDE world champion Ruslan Ponomariov. The game comes as a suggestion from Lakel on Twitter, so thank you for that. It's really a wonderful suggestion. So without dwelling too long on anything but the moves, let's check it out. So Fabi with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5 by Ponomariov, knight to f3 and knight to f6, going for the Petrov defense. We have knight captures on e5, grabbing that pawn, and now d6, chasing away the knight, and then we're going to recapture on e4. And nowadays, even knight captures on f7 is possible. A lot of strong players are playing that, but in the game, knight to f3 was played. We have knight captures on e4, so going for the classical variation, and knight to c3. Now challenging this knight captures and d captures. And now, okay, white's pawn structure is a little bit messed up here, but white has excellent compensation. He has a very natural way of developing his bishop pair. All of the lines are open, and he can just castle to safety very easily. And it's very easy for black to go wrong if he's not careful. For example, you could play something like bishop to g4, let's say h3, we chase away the bishop, black doesn't want to give up the bishop pair, plays bishop h5, we play queen to d5, we attack the bishop, the b7 pawn, and now black has nothing better other than to give up the bishop pair, and you've already won the bishop pair without even doing anything. So you have to know a little, things like that. But okay, in the game, of course, Ponomariov is a very strong player. He plays bishop to e7, bishop to e3 by Fabi, and knight to c6. We have queen to d2, developing the queen, preparing castles queenside, and bishop to e6. Now saying, okay, but if you castle queenside, I'm gonna grab the pawn on a2. Of course, that's a joke, as that is not possible. Fabi just plays castles queenside, and now grabbing the pawn, it does look tempting, but you can't really do it. If you go bishop captures on a2, we're going to first trap the bishop. Of course, we play on king to b2, we're going to capture the bishop next. And if black plays something like a5, we're going to attack the bishop, a4, you're going to capture it, pawn captures, king captures. Yes, you've eliminated the white's king's defenses, but there's nothing to attack the white king with. So yeah, you're not going to have a lot of fun playing this. Of course, it's possible. I know some people that would definitely play this, myself maybe included, but not for a strong player like Ponomariov. So queen to d7, continuing development, and now the prophylactic king to b1. Of course, we have bishop to f6. Now the bishops are very nicely placed, attacking Fabi's queen side, and h3. We have h6 by black, and now we have b3, and it is now, as of move 12, that this position has never been reached again, and we have, a unique game, so to say. So how do you continue here? Well, black plays a6. It seems like a5 is something you want to do. You want to open up the white king's defenses, but a4 pretty much stops that, and there's no further attacking that white king. So instead, we have a6 and now g4 by Fabi. We have queenside castles and the bishop to g2 now. Fabi also placing his bishop pair towards black's king. So g5 and now knight to d4. And this is now a beautifully placed knight. You do not want this knight to remain here. You don't want to capture for nothing, but if you don't have anything better, you have to capture it. Because now we're just already threatening to mess up black's pawn structure. The bishop is also attacking that knight. So you kind of have to do it. White will undouble his pawns. But okay, capturing is the best thing to do here. Knight captures, c captures, and now d5. Black has to close the position, and now all four bishops are really not doing all that much. But that can change in an instant. That's how chess works. So Fabi tries to give his dark square bishop this wonderful diagonal by playing f4. So f4 is played, and now you can't really ignore this, because if f5 is played, then the bishop is trapped here. So your option is either to capture on f4 or to play queen to e7, make some room for the bishop on d7. Maybe this looks a bit passive. So Ponomariov captures on f4, we have bishop captures, and now you could try something like bishop g5. Yes, it's a pawn sacrifice, but it will eliminate white's very strong bishop, whereas your bishop isn't doing all that much. But in the game, we have h5, trying to create some weaknesses on the king's side. Now we have a triple attack here on the g4 pawn, and Fabi just advances it to g5. We have bishop to g7, and now rook d to e1. Here you might consider also a move like h4, but maybe Fabi didn't want to allow black to go for this immediate f6. So instead he goes rook d to e1, not rook h to e1. Seems like this is a more natural move, but you have to keep an eye on that h3 pawn for the moment. So rook d to e1, and what do you play here? Well, here h4, of course. We do not want to allow white to push h4. And now you could go for some like rook to e3, rook to c3, try and put pressure on black's king here. But if you do something like this, we can just move the king. And if rook to c3, rook to c8. So no worries for black here. So Fabi goes bishop to e5, offers a trade of bishops. And even though it seems like you're giving up your really awesome bishop for black's bishop that's not doing all that much, it's not all that black and white, because if captures, then you have a wonderfully placed rook here. At some point, you're going to bring this rook to e1. You're going to put a lot of pressure on the bishop here. You're going to undermine it with g6, and that's basically Fabi's plan. So, of course, we have rook d to g8. Here, Ponomariov says, all right, at some point, we're going to trade. I'm going to put my bishop on queen on d8, and then I'm going to go after your g5 pawn. So, Fabi has to prevent this. He plays queen to f4 first, and now queen to d8, now putting indirect pressure to this g5 pawn. So, bishop to f1. Now Fabi's bishop is going to assume a very different diagonal from this one. From this one, it's not doing all that much. So what can you play here? You don't really gain anything by capturing on e5 right away. We're going to capture with the rook, and the g5 pawn is still defended. So after this bishop to f1, we have king to b8. This king on b8 looks even uglier than on c8, because now he's actually on this diagonal, but the king wants to come to a7. That's the point. So bishop to d3, and now comes bishop back to c8. It's always a target here. Like we said, at some point white will play g6, undermine this bishop, and then play some like captures, and then maybe rook captures on e6. So of course black wants to move this bishop, bishop to c8, and it will work very nicely here as a defender of the queenside pawns. We have king to b2, also a nice safe move for Fabi's king. And now you don't really have a way of increasing the pressure. If you play something like rook to h5 to try and eliminate this bishop and then go after the pawn, we can just play rook h to g1, as now only the bishop is attacking the h3 pawn. But for the moment, we don't really care about this. If you play bishop captures on h3 now, then queen captures on f7, and well, it's just a complete mess of a position that black will not enjoy. So after king to b2, we have bishop captures on e5. Now white has to react to this. Of course, rook captures on e5, and it's a terrible feeling when you have to trade just for the sake of trading, but there wasn't really anything better. And now rook to g7. We have to defend this f7 pawn. We have a4 by Fabi and a5 now by Ponomariov, not allowing this pawn to advance any further. At some point, you want to play king a7, b6, and well, try to get this bishop somewhere, maybe on b7, maybe on a6. All depends on what Fabi plays. So king to a2, and now king to a7. And okay, the a5 pawn is weak. The king is also occupying the a file, so queen back to d2, going after this queen captures on a5 with check. But now just king to b8. And now if you go for this pawn, then Ponomariov grabs this pawn, obviously, with the rook, so not something Fabi is interested in. He repeats queen to f4, and Ponomariov repeats king to a7. So Fabi has to try a different approach to the position, but it's not easily done, as all of his pieces are kind of ideally placed. Okay, maybe not this rook, but this rook is stuck here guarding the h3 pawn. But if you think like that, you will never find great moves and achieve great masterpieces. So here Fabi plays rook h to e1. He offers the h3 pawn, which is well, not all that easy to do. Then you allow black to have this beautiful pass pawn, and you better have something to show for. So here Ponomariov captures the pawn. He says, thank you for allowing me to have this pass pawn. And now what does Fabi do? Well, rook to e7 seems like one good idea, going after the c7 pawn, but then queen d6 blocks the queen. The queen here is undefended, so you don't really have time to go for the pawn. And well, what do you do here? That's the question. So of course that's not what he went for. He played rook to h1. Now the bishop will move, and we're gonna capture this h4 pawn. So here bishop goes back to c8. We have rook captures on h4, rook captures, and the queen captures on h4. So this is how Fabi tries to keep the position alive, and you know, well, he's trying to make some progress. We have b6 by black. going for this maneuver that we discussed. Bishop cannot come to a6. Maybe you can even trade off the light square bishops. But now comes queen to h6. The rook here is undefended, so we're using that to bring the queen all the way to c6. So here, rook to g8, and now queen to c6. And here, you have to find a good move for black. There aren't many, but for example, bishop to b7 definitely keeps the game alive. Now the queen is attacked, the g5 pawn is attacked twice. You kind of have to play queen to f6. We're gonna trade here, and the white will always be better. This is a very advanced pawn. You can't really go after it with the rook. The bishop covers the g6 square, so there's no worries about that. And rook to e7 is coming. You're gonna put pressure on this pawn, on this pawn. This is a weak pawn. So Fabi will definitely have a lot of pressure here. So instead of that, after queen to c6, bishop to e6 was played. It seems like it's guarding everything, but now I don't even have to tell you to pause the video, but I will ask you to pause the video here and try to find the winning idea for Fabi while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on paying attention at least a little bit, as this is what we were discussing for the entire game. And to those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is, of course, g6. Pawn to g6 undermines the bishop here, and there's really nothing black can do about this. It's a really powerful move. Of course, if the pawn is captured, then we just win a free bishop. Black cannot allow this. You could play something like bishop to d7, but this only ends bad for black. For example, queen captures on d5. Okay, you don't lose the material here. We're gonna play f captures on g6, but now bishop e4. We're threatening checkmate, and also if the queen moves too far, we're gonna win the bishop on d7. So queen to c8 to try and keep an eye on everything. Now we're gonna play rook to e7, go after the bishop, and after, let's say, the rook defends, we're going to move the queen to avoid any nasty discoveries. And now black is basically without a move. You can't move the bishop. We're going to play rook captures on c7. So it's a really ugly position for black to handle, and there really aren't any good moves. The bishop here is just a monster controlling these squares. The queen controls a6. We can even just go after the pawn. We can just pick up the pawn. So many possibilities here. White would win this easily. But like I said, after this g6 move, we have rook to g7 by Ponomariov, and now comes g captures on f7, bishop captures on f7, and this is the position that's been sort of the theme of discussion for many years, ever since it was played. It's actually a forced mate in 16, but you guys will not need all that many moves. You only need the first two. So feel free to pause the video and try to find these two miraculous moves while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding the start of this incredible combination. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is, of course, rook to e7. A full rook sacrifice that's hard to comprehend if you don't really see the follow-up after we sacrifice the rook. So you don't have a good option here. Rook captures on c7 wins the game. If you try to defend it with something like king b8 and bishop a6, and there's no defense against checkmate, you have to give up the queen just to prevent checkmate. So after rook to e7, of course, Ponomariov captured the queen, but now comes the move you had to see, and that is bishop to a6. If you've seen the thumbnail, of course, this is much easier, as you know where the pieces should be, but now how do you defend it? There's no good move. Queen to b7 will be checkmate, and you don't have a move here to prevent this. King captures on a6 was played, but luckily our pawn on a4 guards the b5 square. If Fabi saw this position when he played pawn to a4, then, well, I don't know how he lost to Magnus in the previous World Chess Championship match, but maybe Magnus is just that strong. Who knows? But here, of course, Fabi played queen to a8 check, and this is also now a checkmate. So this is just an outstanding game, and once again, thank you, Lakel, for suggesting it to me. I have not seen this game before. I started YouTube after 2014, so this game eluded me, but luckily not forever. So we're gonna show this one more time, even in slow motion. Look at this, rook to e7, just an amazing sacrifice. Queen captures, now bishop to a6, another sacrifice, and then queen to a8 checkmate. Brilliant game by Fabi. So yeah, Hope you guys don't think I exaggerated with the title, but this is something a Tal would pull off on his best day, and this is for my understanding of chess, this is performing a miracle. Fabi also won the tournament, 1.5 points ahead of everyone else, so there's also that. So hope you guys really enjoyed the game. I would like to thank Shanti Chaganti, Matthias Binte, Federico Conte Lofredo, Zachary Bell, and Mike Pomerening for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, hopefully as nice as this one, and checking up on everything else that's happening in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.